Your genetics are a phenomenal thing. A 40-year-old person who looks and feels like they're 28 isn't because they left things to chance. They're
Hey everyone, thank you for being patient for the start of that. We are now here in live with you. There were some people that were joining late, but we're all here. Anyways, I'll make sure just for prudence sake that you're all able to hear me. So if everyone can make a note, if you hear me, see me, say yes in the chat if you don't mind. Yeah, okay, great. And what else? Okay. So the purpose of today this is purely just to help you understand your reports better. So we're hosting a series of these webinars to allow you to dive into each of the main sections of the report and get more value of them. That's all we're trying to do, is just allow you to understand the data more and allow you to get more value, make more changes, learn things that are clinical in nature that we aren't necessarily allowed to say in a report because it's a consumer product. And so regulatory wise, there's some things we can't say, but we can in this format. So now, one thing I would ask, if you haven't already, just mute yourself so that as people are listening, they aren't hearing background noise. In the bottom left corner, you'll see the microphone. Just click that until you see a red mic, and then you'll be good. So now, let's go into the mood and behavior report. Oh, a couple people saying they can't hear me. So most people are saying that yes, they can. But some people are saying no, they can't. But we'll continue. Okay. Here we go. So starting with the dopamine pathway, I'm going to speak to the neurochemicals and how they function and how they possibly change mood and behavior, change your perception, change the way you feel. Also, how they lead to conditions that we put names to, like anxiety, depression, etc. And I'm going to separate them at first so that you understand how to look at each one. And then we're going to combine some of them together that equal traits and combinations. So now, step one, dopamine. Dopamine is the chemical that allows you to experience pleasure and reward. And some of you may have watched some of our videos and heard this before. Beyond that, we understand that the way we experience pleasure and reward is highly variable for all of us, depending on the neurochemicals and how we experience them and the genes that drive them. So the first thing we have to look at when we look at dopamine is the DRD2 pathway. DRD2, the gene, if you have it in your report, some of you, by the way, don't have your reports yet, so just make a note of this and keep in mind we will be doing this again, rolling ongoing. So keep in mind that if you don't have your reports yet, you'll be invited back to this again. But for those of you that do have your reports, you're welcome to open up and follow along. So step one, DRD2. When you have the suboptimal version of the gene, or the optimal version of the gene, you're at an extreme. So AA or GG. GG, and you can look in your report again. GG means that you have a maximum possible density of dopamine receptors. So it's very easy for you to experience intensity, reward, and pleasure. AA, or the opposite, means you have the least possible density of receptors. And now, looking at that, we have different traits that come out of that. One is, if you have the maximum density, it's so much easier to experience pleasure and reward that it's somewhat of a constant. What does that mean? Smelling the tasty food, enjoying the TV show, it's not an elevated sense of pleasure over and above your daily average because it's so easy for you to experience anyways. When you have the AA or the minimal, it's so difficult to experience pleasure and reward that everything is exciting and everything is pleasurable. So you're experiencing this world in a very different context than the person who's experiencing it at the GG dopamine level. The people that are in the middle, the AG, that have one copy of the G, one copy of the A, experience pleasure and reward as somewhat of a Zen experience, meaning that it's as it should be. Not only do they do the work as they should, but they also take their break on time. They're not going to overdo, they're not going to underdo. And these, now there's a kind of a spectrum when it comes to pleasure and reward. We have to now layer on other neurochemicals. We look at COMT. COMT is the protein that clears dopamine. And I'm going to, once I tell you all this, I'm going to speak to the whole thing and contextualize it. COMT is the neurochemical, the protein that clears this neurochemical. So depending on what version you have there, the people that have the AA or slow clearance stay in that pleasure and reward for longer. The people that have the GG or fast clearance exit it very quickly. Now we start to play with these two, dopamine and COMT, and you start to build who you are, starting with the reward pathway. If I am that person that experiences very low dopamine levels, then it's likely for me to get depressed. It's likely for me to have addictive tendencies. And if I also have the fast clearance, that's going to be even more exponentially problematic, because not only do I not feel it, but it also doesn't last long enough. So I need it again and again and again and again. The person who has low dopamine expression, but a very slow clearance, may get stuck in that reward. I can't feel it, but the thing that I feel, I can't let go of it because it lasts so long for me, right? Now, the opposite is also true. The people that have the maximum density, they're more likely to say no. They're going to say, yeah, this is not interesting. Oh, that Netflix show you're telling me about, I don't really care about it. No, that food isn't so tasty, because pleasure and reward is so easy that they're not necessarily pursuing or chasing every single thing. In fact, they're more likely to say no. If they also are paired with this very slow clearance, they're going to get stuck even more in the binging, because not only do they not experience, but when they do, or sorry, not only experience a high level, but when they do, it's paired with a slow clearance, which makes them get stuck. So I know that there's a lot going on here, but if you sort of put this into these profiles, it starts from a I can't get no satisfaction level all the way down to I get stuck and can't leave satisfaction, right? And now depending on which pieces you have, you can start to see this map being built. I clear fast, I clear slow. I experience low, I experience high. And you yourself can start to figure out what that means, right? You yourself can start to understand these pieces of this puzzle and then use it to interpret. And that's our intention, is to make this easy for you. It's not our intention to make you dependent on us. It's more like, how do we arm you with this information so that you can use it with all the future questions you have to ask? You may have a problem you're dealing with a year from now that you're not dealing with today. You can then go back to the genome to help you navigate that problem, because you understand how your brain works. And today, of course, we're talking about the brain. So that's that kind of, call it a matrix grid of starting all the way from I can't get no satisfaction. A dopamine, slim to none, I can't feel it, and very fast clearance. All the way down to GG dopamine, I experience it at a very high level and very slow clearance. It lasts way too long. And you can be in between. Now, the people that are right in the middle, that have the AG for both, right? That's what is typically is considered a mutation or a variant, right? I have one copy of this, one copy of that. I have a mutation, is actually the ideal scenario for the dopamine pathway. The ideal scenario is if you're in the middle for both, for DRD2 and COMT, you're going to do what you need to do regardless of the stimulus. Picture a nurse. Picture the person that just gets it done, as it should be, dependable, always available, right? And they will do it on time as it was meant to be, but they're not going to overdo it. They will go home on time, and they're also not going to underdo it. They're not going to leave early before the job was done. So that's that Zen middle ground, which we believe in terms of that reward pathway is a very healthy place to be in terms of anxiety, depression. But depending what context you're in, it may not be the tool you want. And as we move forward, speaking of these various neurochemical pathways, the one thing you should consider is the context. And this context, that's the thing I just said, that you may come a year from now and ask questions that you're not asking today because your context changed. You know, today I'm a stay-at-home mom. A year from now, I decided to open a business. So I have different demands on my neurochemicals. I need something different. I no longer want to be Zen. I no longer want to be reliable and dependable. I want to be able to take risks, and I want a bit of a lower dopamine profile. And now between all these profiles, this is why we have the recommendations built in terms of what supplements to take, what exercises to do, because you can decide, even though your genome is here, if I wanted to upregulate it a little bit or downregulate it a little bit, we know what supplements, what exercises, what exposures will do that, right? So that's the dopamine pathway, reward and pleasure from slim to none to a little bit too much, and you can be anywhere in between. You have the extreme of the warrior, who is the I can't feel dopamine and it lasts a very short time, so I take risks and I'm prone towards depression, addiction, or achievement, depending on my context. Nothing going on, I'm depressed. Pleasure being prompted, I'm addicted. Reward being sought, and I'm an achievement-oriented person. This person on the other extreme is anxiety, right? Binging, or deep, call it analytical work, as opposed to the reward-seeking, achievement-oriented person. They're more the in-depth person. Why? I feel anxiety because I get stuck in the pleasure, I get stuck in the reward. So I think about it way too long. And when you take it away from me, I'm not used to not having pleasure. I'm so used to being satisfied that I don't feel good when you take it away. That's anxiety, as opposed to the depression up here. Or binging, not addiction. I don't need to do it every day. I'm not constantly doing this and structuring my day around it. That's addiction. It's more binging, that when I do finally find that thing that gives me that wow factor, I'm stuck because I feel it so high, the intensity level, and I can't stop because it feels so good. And it lasts too long, so I can't get out of it, right? And the last piece around the work, as opposed to the reward-seeking entrepreneur, it's more like the expert who binges and dives deep and does a high quality of work versus a high quantity of work, right? So these are the two spectrums in the dopamine pathway. And again, you can start to see these pieces and use them once you understand what each piece means and how they sort of interact with each other. So now, adding on to that, the ADRA2B pathway, ADRA2B. You, depending on what version you have, from II all the way to DD, you may have what's called a deletion. And this is something unique that the DNA company tests for, that most genetic companies don't test for, which is, to what degree do I experience a noradrenaline response? And do I imprint it or do I ignore it, depending on a deletion? So in the last gene, we were talking about AG or GG or AA, which is a SNP. And this gene that's thousands of letters long, somewhere along that gene, one of the letters was spelt wrong. That's called a SNP. It's a single mutation within that thousands of letters of code. There's also something called an insertion or deletion, which means it's not one letter that was spelt wrong. It was an entire paragraph is missing from this gene. So imagine the implication. If one letter can make that much difference in the dopamine pathway, imagine if you are removing an entire chunk of the gene. There's a massive paragraph error, or there's an extra paragraph with an insertion or deletion. It can be an insertion also. You can have extra, right? So now this is possible with ADRA2B. And now what happens? II, if you're experiencing the II, if that's what you see in your report, means you have the ideal full code. There's nothing missing, right? So there's no chunk that is potentially gone. And so this gene is functioning at its full capacity. What does that mean? When you have an adrenaline response, think about something that would trigger PTSD, that truly impactful moment, God forbid, a car accident or a fight or a tree falls on your house, something that's that truly impactful negative stimulus moment. Adrenaline starts pumping, and your body is then filled with the chemical you need to be able to plow through that moment and do things that you're normally not capable of doing. That's what adrenaline allows you to do. In that, if you're deleted for this, you may end up imprinting. So what ends up happening is you don't have the right, call it exit, and you don't clear the chemical property, especially of the COMT in combination, and we're going to talk about it in a second. And so it leads to this much more, in terms of recall, an imprint. You're tattooing that moment, right? So now, when that, God forbid, car accident, fight, tree falls in your house, I hope that doesn't happen to anyone here, happens, and you have that wow, negative, impactful moment, there's some people that remember the information, there's some people that remember the information and the feeling, and there's some people that really, really remember the feeling. There's not zero information, but they're really leaning towards a feeling. And those are the people that are deleted. Now, how does this express? This expresses as not this again, not that person again, holding the grudge. I can't walk down that street again. I'm never talking to you again. Versus, yeah, this sucks, but I'll see you next week. Because one person can remember the information, use the information, have the intellectual response. The other person is also using the emotion that was felt during that scenario as a forward-moving filter. They're holding on to that, and they believe that that is, in the current moment, a feeling that is attached to the current moment, which they're actually bringing forward from the past. So they're recalling the feeling and using that as the decision-making tool. Now, one other nuance to this is COMT also clears this. So if you have the really fast COMT, you're going to not remember as much. There may even be confusion. If you have the really slow COMT, you're going to remember a lot more. So now again, if you think of this as like a matrix grid, we speak to extremes. If I have the DD completely deleted ADRA2B, and so I'm much more likely to experience trauma and bind it and remember it and use that feeling as a primary decision-making driver. And I also have a very slow COMT. So I was in that moment for far too long. That's the person that truly experiences trauma, PTSD. And when the next thing that happens that triggers it, they see that frown again of that person, or they hear that noise again, they're bringing back the exact feeling they felt at a very impactful level, and they're remembering all these details of that last thing that happened. So that's PTSD. Now, the person who has this deletion that feels it, but has a very fast COMT clearance, ends up in somewhat of a confusion. This feels horrible, but it's dysfunctional for me because I can't really put it to words. I don't remember enough details. And I might even get it wrong and blame you for something that I'm not supposed to blame you for. So this is where you start to think about who you are and how you feel and how you react and how these neurochemicals may change your perception. Now, again, going back to the context, right, which changes the outcome, just like we said for dopamine, you could have the context of, reward seeking, the context of I'm around alcohol all day, or the context of I'm sitting at home with nothing to do, leads to 3 different outcomes. Same thing here. The context of, do I work with a team and I'm the leader? So I may have more EQ, emotional intelligence. I may have more empathy. I may be an empathetic leader where people feel very loyal to me because they know that I get them and I can read the room. Or is it in the context of a relationship where it's not this again, or you're doing this again, I can't believe you would even think about this again, and the other person is saying this has nothing to do with last time, what are you talking about? And it creates friction, right? So now you start to understand that we all see things differently, right? We all see things the way that our genes are driving our neurochemicals to process that scenario, not only in the moment, but also in the recall, in the way we remember it. using Adra2B. Now, we didn't speak to the other extreme of the II, the person that has the, what we would call ideal Adra2B. Now, again, given the context, it may not be ideal. It may be, why are you so cold? Why don't you care? Right? I'm worried. Why don't you care about me? It's not that they don't care. It's that they're not using emotion as a tool. They're not using emotion as their filter, as their driver, as their decision maker. They're using the information. And it doesn't mean that they didn't feel it. It means that they don't use that as a forward-making tool. In that moment where there was the whatever that thing that happened, your kid got lost and mom and dad both got really worried and mom and dad really got scared. And they both experienced how scary that moment was. Both the DD and the II experienced that. The DD, the next time they even think about that shopping mall, is like, child, come here. Helicopter mall, right? We're not going through this again. The II parent may say, go ahead and do your thing, because that was last time. That has nothing to do with this time, right? So that perception completely changes. And now the person that has the II, low EQ imprint, that has the slower comp, is also remembering more information, not emotion, more information. The person that has the fast comp is remembering less information. So again, there's this confusion and friction that can happen between these two people, because not only is this person saying, this is bad, it feels like this person is saying, if they have the slow comp, this is okay, and here's how I can explain it to you, because they have all the information in their recall. So these types of scenarios, I'm sure as I'm speaking, you're remembering things you've been through, and you're remembering people you've spoken to, and you're remembering people pointing fingers at you at some point, whether you're on this end or that end, like, why don't you care, or you care too much, right? Keep in mind, again, in the context that's appropriate for this wiring, it is a superpower. In the context that is not appropriate for this wiring, it is a crutch or a kryptonite. So why are we going through this tonight? For you to better understand in the real world how your genetic results apply by me speaking to real world examples, so that you do know what your kryptonite and what your superpowers are. And each one of these things is both. I could have the worst DD, Adra2B, completely deleted, holding on to trauma, feeling every little thing, and the slowest calm, so I remember it all. But I might be a psychotherapist, or I might be a teacher. And all of a sudden it's my superpower, and I'm better than anyone at my work, right? Or I might be working in a team on a construction site with people that just want to get it done, and all they care about is the information, and I'm going to completely fail because I'm not designed for that context. So there's no good or bad is what I mean to say. It's just understanding who you are, and understanding that when you use words like anxiety, depression, burnout, it's usually a context misalignment. And this is the greatest thing that I could potentially empower you with tonight, is to understand the thing that may be feeling like a problem is actually your superpower, if you are in the right context, and you perhaps need to find that context, right? So that's Adra2B. Let's move on to serotonin. So your serotonin pathway, sorry, I know there's been a lot of questions here, and keep in mind that we will have a lot of time for Q&A. The majority of our time, in fact, I understand the greatest benefit I could offer you tonight is to have your live questions answered. And so, yes, there's been a lot of questions. As you can see, we will get to Q&A. So make sure you're making your notes as we're going along, and I'll keep answering them. And I'm sorry, I should have let you know that in the beginning. Otherwise, there's no way for me to continue speaking and continue answering these questions. We'll never get anywhere. So I'll keep going through it, make notes with your questions, and we'll leave a good hour for Q&A. And I'm pretty sure we will use it all up, given our great audience that we have here today. So next step, serotonin and serotonin dysregulation. When your serotonin pathway is dysregulated, the SS or LS version, when we talk about this clinically, it usually points to anxiety and depression. So clinical research usually speaks to symptomatic outcomes, right? What is this thing called? How do I diagnose it? And now I'm going to study that thing. I'm going to study the symptom, right? And the symptom looks like anxiety. The symptom looks like depression. Once you have that symptomology, you also start researching from that context. And this is where we feel things got broken. And then things like serotonin got labeled as anxiety and depression medication. Oh, sorry, anxiety and depression genes and chemicals that require medication. There's something far greater than that going on, which is what leads to the anxiety. And we're going to speak to that right now. So we studied the actual mechanism, the biochemistry, what's going on. Why is it that people with serotonin dysregulation constantly have anxiety, constantly have depression? And why is it that some of them don't? And this is the big aha moment, that there's no certainty to a gene pathway equaling a problem unless it's a genetic condition. This gene equals sickle cell syndrome. You have it, right? You already know you have it. The majority of we deal with isn't that. The majority of we deal with, I was born like this, but now I feel like this. What happened? Something changed, right? That's chronic in nature. It's developed. And when it comes to all of what we're saying in mood and behavior, again, these things are developed because of usually a context misalignment. So serotonin. If you are the LL, you're not going to experience some of the problems we're talking about, but there's a whole other set of problems which we'll talk about later. The LS and the SS are who are dysregulated. And the S just means you have a shorter receptor, so your brain cannot experience serotonin at the appropriate level based on the stimulus you're experiencing. So serotonin is meant to allow you to respond to the stimulus, whether it's a sound, a smell, somebody talking, a bird flying by the window while you're trying to focus. So all of those things, the mechanism is your brain is meant to prioritize stimulus. With all of these things going on, what am I supposed to focus on? I have an outcome, a goal. I'm sitting here trying to do something. We're all doing this together right now. If somebody were to walk behind me, how many of you would be distracted for the next 2 minutes and not be able to go back to what we were doing? And how many of you would completely ignore that and not even worry about it? That's serotonin dysregulation, right? Can I actually focus on what I'm supposed to focus on? And that inability to prioritize stimulus is then what leads to the irritability, the distractibility, the walking on eggshells when someone's trying to talk to you because they know you could be easily prompted and respond the wrong way. And that's what eventually leads to the anxiety and the depression. Because if you have this tool, which is actually a superpower, and I'll explain that, and you're in the wrong context, imagine not being able to prioritize stimulus and reading a legal contract. It actually becomes a superpower because now you're seeing every little detail that your peers don't see because your brain just cannot ignore anything. And so that innate superpower of, I am an amazing lawyer, and I can tell you over and over and over again, when we've done genetic reviews on lawyers, they usually are serotonin dysregulated. When we've done genetic reviews on financial analysts, they usually are serotonin dysregulated, and they thrive in that role because they're in the context that their suboptimal genes are actually designed for, and it becomes a superpower. So the same thing that makes you irritable, distractible, pushing you towards anxiety because every little stimulus pokes and prods at you and you can't prioritize and focus on the right one. So it's not ADHD, it's not attention deficit, it's hyperattention. I give everything attention, too much attention to everything. That same thing in the context of I see every detail is your superpower. And you again need to be in the right context. So the LL version, I said I would speak to that, is the opposite, which is my brain is really good at prioritizing stimulus. My brain is really good at ignoring the details, which makes me more macro, which means when I have to go read the legal contract, I'm probably going to lose the lawsuit because I don't notice anything, right? I'm that person that needs that serotonin dysregulated person as a teammate to guide me through that type of scenario. And if you pair that with reward-seeking behavior, low dopamine, even more so you don't feel, right? And you don't notice because you're also clearing neurochemicals quick and moving on, right? So all of a sudden you start to understand another layer to your neural map. So dopamine is my reward pathway. I can understand, am I more reward seeking? Am I less reward seeking? Am I chasing things? Am I ignoring things? Am I constantly shifting gears? Am I getting stuck? Right? Then we have noradrenaline. Am I holding on to trauma? Am I letting go of trauma? Do I have emotional intelligence? Do I appear to be more cold? Do I confuse my recall because my clearance is too fast and I get frustrated with people because I'm actually not remembering things correctly? Or do I remember a little bit too much and read into the situation too much? And then I become the burden in the room because I'm putting too much onto the table for people to deal with. And then you layer on top of that the serotonin response, which is, here's the stimulus that just happened. And am I riding the wave of stimulus as I should be, or am I more like this? It's happy, it's bothersome. It's happy, it's someone tell me a joke, I'm up here. Someone irritate me, I'm down here. And I'm very easily getting pulled in directions because my brain cannot prioritize the stimulus and I'm responding to everything, even the things that I shouldn't be, right? That leads to that irritability, frustration. That leads to when you're trying to talk to the person that has the LL serotonin that is able to ignore all that stimulus and doesn't see the world the way you see it and doesn't care about all those details, is like, let's move on. That doesn't matter. I'm not worried about crossing the T and dotting the I. I already get it. I don't need to go into the level of detail. We see this constant friction where that high-powered lawyer that got to that high-powered position because they can very easily read and see, they can read the room and understand, they catch every little detail, is trying to work with their team. And they have a meeting and they say, team, here's the objective for the next week. Here's 10 action items. Let's come back. I'm going to meet you in a week and deliver it to me, please, because I need this for my case. Team comes back and say, here you go, boss. It's all done. And boss says, what about this? What about this? What about this? They're like, no, we got it done. It's all here. He's like, what about this? What about this? What about this? They're like, we got it done. Because what they're perceiving as complete is very different than what he's or she is perceiving as complete because of the level of detail or nuance that's required for that brain to get satisfied versus the other brain to get satisfied. So again, understanding even your team, even your children. Imagine knowing when your children or your spouse or your sister and the work you're trying to do with them. And I've done this with my own children, by the way, and they're different. They're not all the same. So the one that is serotonin dysregulated, I have to be very careful in how I talk to him about his schooling because he can very easily get provoked and irritated and just throw his books to the wayside. Like, I'm not doing this, right? Versus the way I have to approach him is very different than the other kids. So what this does for relationships when you start to understand and the removal of friction and the ease of dealing with people and the things that are those pain points that keep coming up. You know, most fights we have with people are the same root cause over and over again because they're friction points. They're the things that we don't align on, where we just see the world differently. If you see things the same, you're going to align and you're not going to fight. So there's a perception difference that leads to friction, that leads to elevation, that leads to the fight. So understanding each other's perspective is what allows you to then remove that friction, which allows you to have amazing relationships, partnerships, colleagues, children, all of that stuff. And we've done this in our team. A funny thing, our executive team, we know each other's DNA. So we work with each other in that context. We know who's going to be a little slower, who's going to be a little faster, who's going to overdo it, who's going to underdo it, who does the details, who does the macro, and now we're aligned and friction-free, right? So now moving on from that, the BDNF pathway, brain-derived neurotropic factor. I'm going to speak to that, and then we're going to open it up to questions. And just for the sake of everybody here, keep in mind, there's 300 people here. People have questions about their genetics. If you don't mind, keep it to questions about helping you understand your report. If you have questions about receiving a report, how do I log in? You know, how do I buy supplements? If you don't mind, keep that for our client care team, not for tonight, just because we want to make sure in the hour that we're going to give everybody that they get a chance to understand the reports. This was the purpose of tonight, was for you to have a one-on-one direct with me and to be able to ask whatever you want to ask, right? About understanding your data better. Let's keep it to that. If we don't, we're going to run out of time. That's why I'm mentioning that, because there's a lot of people here and everybody asking questions about various things like what day do I get my report? How do I talk about this program, etc. We're not going to have time for the questions we need to ask today, which is, I can't understand this about my report. What does it mean? Right? Or I have this problem, how do I fix it? Let's stick to those kind of questions. With that being said, any other question you have, we are here. We will drop in an email address for client care in our team. And of course, we're here to support you with all that stuff, and we will, just for the sake of everyone's time. You see the email there, client care, connect there for anything else, right? Okay, now, for the person that just said report, we're only talking about mood and behavior. So all you need to do is look at the system summary for mood and behavior. We're only talking about that one section. So mood and behavior, system summary, all the genes can be seen in a space this size. They're in one place, everything we're talking about today. Okay, so BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. What do we know about that? The primary clinical description is neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity means, how do I develop new neural pathways in my brain? How does my brain grow? Think about, a spider web developing. That's neuroplasticity. All these synapses that connect and new pathways where information flows, and that's how my brain grows and develops. And it does this in the billions, right? There's many, many, many neural pathways. So how efficiently do I do that? And efficient or not efficient isn't good or bad. Comes down to context. Again, everything we speak of in mood and behavior comes down to context. So the person that has the optimal GG-BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, does a really good job of developing new neural pathways, which means that they can typically learn skills easier. They typically will recover from concussion faster, and they're less susceptible to concussion also. They can take that hit to the head. And we do this work with professional athletes where, why is it that person keeps getting concussed? And it often has to do with BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, the ingredient, the seeds that allows your brain to develop new pathways and heal. And it also speaks to mood, right? So when it comes to brain-derived neurotrophic factor, and funny, I just saw this question from Nicole, and this might get answered. Nicole, I know we haven't got to questions yet, but which BDNF do you have? If you don't mind answering that, which BDNF do you have? Because we talked about trauma. Trauma is, I remember the feeling, right? Then there's what we call shell shock, right? And also, if you don't mind, sorry, I'm seeing, if you don't mind, write your name next to your answer. For Nicole, because I saw 3 different answers. So Nicole, which one is you? Nicole, what do you have? Just because I want to use that as an example for everyone. And Nicole, if you don't mind checking also, which TPH do you have? Nicole, which TPH do you have? Okay, so now, if you have and here's your answer, Nicole. There's a difference between PTSD, I remember the feeling, and shell shock. For the people, and this is one of the most impactful things that we've learned from BDNF, and this is unique knowledge, you won't find this out there in genetic research. We only know this because we met people, we studied them, right? We interviewed 7,000 people over 3 years and understood their behavior. And one thing we learned is, if you look at Nicole's answer, she has the TPH GG and the BDNF GG. So she has the optimal GG. There's this unique phenomenon called epistasis, where one gene can turn another gene off. It overpowers it. So the TPH-GG, which Nicole has, does such a good job of doing its job, it turns the BDNF off. But it doesn't turn it off for all of its functions. Nicole would still do a good job of neuroplasticity and learning new skills. She wouldn't have that tunnel vision, but it would affect her mood. And how does it affect her mood? Meaning and weight. So there's one thing that I remember the feeling, I experienced trauma. Every time I talk to you again, I'm going to remember exactly how you made me feel. That's trauma. There's a whole other thing of how much does it mean, right? What's the weight and burden of that thing? I remember the feeling, but I go on with my day. I remember the feeling and I cannot function. I can't get out of bed because of the weight, the meaning that I apply. And when you have what Nicole is experiencing, which is the TPH GG and the BDNF GG, that's what ends up happening. Or if you have BDNF AA or AG, right? So either the BDNF itself is suboptimal or the TPH makes the BDNF suboptimal. One of those two scenarios causes you to give things a lot of meaning. What does that mean? Potentially slam a door, walk out of a meeting. I can't do this anymore. Potentially crying over spilled milk, drama queen response. If we want to use easy to understand language, that's what it is. It's the drama queen response where things mean a lot and I overreact, right? So when you have that experience and you pair that with the trauma, this is work that we've done with the US military on Veterans Affairs, where when somebody has the ADRA2B deletion and they're off for BDNF, that's the person that has a clinical PTSD. They remember everything, but they also have the shell shock, the hamster wheel, can't stop thinking about it. It means a lot. That is a burden. That's a clinical burden, right? So all of a sudden you can't feel, you can't let go of the feeling, and it means a lot. But it also is true for the positive. The same thing is true when something is a little too funny, right? You may make it more funny than it needs to be. When something is entertaining, it may be more entertaining. When there's good news, hey, we got a new client, you may be overly celebrating that because it just means so much when we just need to move on and get back to work, right? So that's a trait of brain-derived neurotropic factor, where how much meaning do I give things? Now, if I am that, I have high anxiety because my dopamine levels are high and my comp is low, my serotonin is dysregulated, so I read into all the little details, my ADRA2B is dysregulated, so I feel the pain and trauma, and my BDNF is also, I give it a lot of meaning. That's the person that's going to have a lot of mood and behavior issues. Or if they were in the right context of being a thought leader, a scientist in the lab, they would be the best in the world. They need to be in a context where they are locked down, doing that one thing that they're really good at and becoming the world leader on it, and being sort of removed from all the stimulus. And picture, you think about a Spider-Man movie where there's that guy in the lab that's making that next thing that the evil guy is trying to steal and turn into a weapon, right? He's always that guy in his lab, doesn't want to talk to anyone, doesn't want to do anything. He's probably a little bit clumsy, and because tunnel vision of my brain does this really, really, really well because of my poor BDNF. So instead of developing all these neural pathways, I develop a few, but I develop them really well. And when I need to go do something else and learn something else, it's very difficult for me. But when I eventually learn that thing, I'm also going to be better than than everybody else, because I learn it really well. Once I need to go through the experience. It's experiential learning for me. It's hard for me to develop new skills, but when I do, I'm really, really, really good at it. So that's BDNF. Now, it also speaks to neural development, meaning when we need to look out for things like dementia and Alzheimer's. If your brain doesn't do a good job of developing new neural pathways, that means you're not constantly replenishing and repairing the wear and tear on your brain, which we're experiencing more and more every day. There's two things happening. One is we are just living longer, right? So we now the average expectancy for North Americans is almost 80. Last generation, it was like 60. So we've really progressed in how long we age, but we haven't yet armed ourselves in how to keep our health span up there with our lifespan. We've understood lifespan. We no longer have, bacteria and wars and all these things that kill us, right? Which is what our ancestors dealt with. But we haven't yet understood how to be healthy at that old age. We just take for granted we're just going to keep living. And so we end up spending the last 15 years in chronic disease. and treatment. And it's either cancer, cardiovascular, Alzheimer's, something gets us when it shouldn't have to. And in this particular context, brain health is where we're focused, and it's so important. So if your BDNF is suboptimal, if it's AA or AG, or you have the GGTPH with the GG BDNF, which kind of turns it off, then you do have to be thinking about supporting brain health. And what does that mean? Well, if you're going to live till 80 or beyond, 100, 120, whatever, wherever you get to, then you have to think about things like sauna, things like whole fruit coffee extract. We make a product called BDNF Optimizer, for example, which boosts BDNF levels. You have to think about having a very strict breathing and meditative routine around your day, and you have to incorporate that at some point, because that also boosts BDNF levels. You have to think about starting your day with temperature dysregulation, hot shower, cold ice tub. These are all things that boost BDNF. And you have to do that in order to maintain brain health as you age. And, Arnaud just pointed out that he's AG BDNF, AA suboptimal, yes, and GG suboptimal. So AG is in the middle, which means not doing the best job. So if you are AG, it's already enough of a warning. GG is extreme. That's the scientist in the lab that really has really poor neural development. But AG is already pointing to you need to focus on brain health. And this is, if anything, when it comes to genomics, the way we've understood it and the way you've probably experienced it now that you have your reports, we don't believe, you have an 80% chance of breast cancer is all there is to learn from genetics. What we believe is, let's talk about the systems and pathways as we're discussing tonight. And all we're trying to do is identify the red flag. So as we went through all of this tonight, we laid out the neurochemicals of the brain. Where do I see something stand out that, call it a red flag, that I need to prioritize and work on? Because that's the thing that's going to trigger anxiety, depression, poor brain health, dementia over time, burnout. That's the thing that's going to make me feel not good, right? And that's the thing I need to prioritize. The things that are doing well, great, let them do well. And now the work actually begins. The work is actually after identifying the red flag, because you now need to develop the habits that are aligned to how you function, which starts with context, the thing that I've said several times tonight. It starts with context. Understand your brain, how it's wired, who you are, how you perceive the world, how the world perceives you, right? Also relationships, right? And now start to put yourself in the context that you were designed for, and start to let go of the things that you're not designed for. And, I was just speaking to somebody who said something profound, which is letting go is not quitting, right? And we all don't want to quit because it makes us feel weak. We're taught that you don't want to give up, right? There's some things by giving up, you're actually letting go and removing the things that you shouldn't be doing to begin with. Again, that starts with understanding your map, who you are, knowing what the right choices and habits are, and what the wrong choices and habits are. And if you always do everything right, and what I mean by right is aligned with your genetic capacity, you are always going to feel good. If you always do everything wrong, which means misaligned with your genetic capacity, you're always going to feel wrong. And you're going to use words like anxiety and depression and PTSD. And, Nicole said in there, I don't feel right. I don't have this atrophy thing, but I feel like I have trauma. Why does she feel like she has trauma? Because she's holding on to, because of her BDNF, a lot of meaning on things. So what does she need to do? She needs to get in the sauna, boost her BDNF. She needs to go do things that are fun and pleasurable and give her other things to apply meaning to. She needs to take a supplement that may boost her BDNF, that allows her to let go of that deep meaning she applies to things and feel quote unquote normal in that context, right? So now you know what choices to make. So I'm going to look at a couple of these questions. We're at the top of the hour now. I'll answer a couple of ones I've seen here, and then I'll ask you to start dropping more questions. Just let's wait till I answer these ones first. Can you explain a little bit about the epigenetics? How do you interact with the environment, trigger, gene response? Okay, so epigenetics is three things: environment, nutrition, lifestyle. Your base genome is what we describe. You'll find yourself within these maps, right? Your epigenetics is, if I use the sauna, let me give you an example. The Finnish population, Finland, are known to be the happiest nation on the planet. Right? It's been said over and over and over again. There's been different people that have ranked them and said they're the happiest people on the planet. Finnish people genetically are known to have the worst possible BDNF consistently on average. Why are they so happy? Right? They shouldn't be happy. They should be feeling a lot of meaning to things. They should be constantly off in their mood, the way Nicole said she feels, right? Why is it that they are voted the happiest people on the planet? Well, Finnish people culturally have more saunas per capita than any country in the world. It's a daily regimen. If you live in Finland, you're almost guaranteed that you're in a sauna at least once a day. Sauna is a potent upregulator of brain-derived neurotrophic factor. So you have a nation that does this because when they don't feel good. And so they're at their best and they're voted the happiest nation because they're doing the thing that makes them feel good. Right? And so I know it's difficult to get precise and personal. And this is why we have coaching programs. By the way, anyone here that wants to dive deeper and understand, how do I do all this stuff? The reports spell it out. But if you want someone to handhold you through it, we do have coaching, as you probably already know. We can look at that later. That's not the purpose of tonight, but just to answer that question. We do have that, and someone can hand you through and build you a personalized playbook for every choice you should be making. And then your epigenetic choices are aligned with your genetic capacity. So some type of chart, that's actually the simplest things are often the most brilliant. And yes, we should have a chart. So we actually do for the purpose of research. We just didn't share it here because I didn't want to overwhelm you with visuals. And really have you listen to the information. But we do have charts. It's really just laying out AG, GG, G, and then putting those things together. But we'll share those with you. Does anyone remember what GG or DRD2? I was one of the people who had no idea. Okay, so GG is the maximum density receptors, which means it's very easy to experience pleasure and reward. And AA is the lowest density receptor. So the person whose GG is more likely to not be interested, not try, because it's so easy to experience pleasure. They're not pursuing it. And the AA is more likely reward seeking. I need it, I want it, yes, 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 because it's so hard for them to experience pleasure and reward. They're constantly chasing it. So Robin has 2 teen daughters, trying to understand their emotions, reaction, homework, and chores. So yeah, I use this. I have 3 kids, mapped them all, understood exactly how they need to be disciplined differently, how I need to speak to them differently, how some need structure, how some need freedom, how some need to work before they eat, how some need to work after they eat. I've understood their metabolic pathways. We're not talking about diet today, but just so you know, this is something that I personally mapped out. It's probably the most impactful place to use this technology is with your children. Because the earlier you start reading your human instruction manual, the less mistakes you're going to make. Right. And it's such a powerful tool that I use on a daily basis. And as they're aging and the problems that need to be solved change, I'm still going back and using this tool to solve those problems. I have a kid now that wants to change schools so he can enter a basketball program. And I'm trying to navigate that. And again, I'm using the way he thinks to speak to him appropriately so that we actually align and connect and agree with each other, because my neurochemical pathway is very different than his. So it's a very useful tool for that context. So the BDNF optimizer is not caffeine or coffee. It's a coffee fruit extract. There's no caffeine. It's an extract from the fruit, not the bean. So this fruit is known to be the most potent BDNF optimizer in terms of all the supplements we could find, and we look through a lot. Trust me, we have one of our co-founders, that's all he does all day, all night is examine supplements. Okay, so Lisa she's AG for dopamine, II, SS, serotonin. So serotonin, yeah, so sorry, I'll keep it. Took low in dopamine, serotonin, tax finance, so with moon depression, whatever. So you just described exactly. So what did we say? Lisa says that she does tax and finance and she's a serotonin dysregulated. What do we say? That this is the exact profile that's designed for analytical type work, right? So your mood issues likely aren't coming from your work, which they do for a lot of people. It's likely sourced elsewhere. It may be family, it may be friction, it may be food. So keep in mind, serotonin is made in your gut and it's made during your sleep. So if you don't have proper food habits and proper sleep habits, not only is serotonin dysregulated, but you don't have enough fuel to begin with. So one of the first places we go for somebody like Lisa is my serotonin is dysregulated and my mood is off, is you need to start eating really clean. And you probably need to eat a little bit less, condense the eating window so your stomach has more time to recover, and you need to sleep well. Right now, we're going to have a separate talk on sleep because serotonin dysregulated people typically don't sleep well, and we're going to explain that in one of the. I think it's the next event we're having together. But those are two things I would say are like a no-brainer. Fix your gut, fix your sleep, so that you can make more serotonin. The other thing you could do is increase your serotonin levels by taking a supplement called 5-HTP. If you look at the gene for serotonin, it's called 5-HTT-LPR, right? 5-HTP is a supplement that helps you regulate your serotonin. We put it in we make a product called Deep Calm, and it's in there, right? So it's a cocktail of a few things. You can just go get 5-HTP from anywhere. You might already have it, or you can get the Deep Calm that we make, which allows you to manage specifically what you're talking about, right? And be more in that zen. But again, context. When you're at work on a big project, I wouldn't take the supplement because you want your superpower to be unlocked, which is I see every little detail. You don't want to be in a zen state, right? When you're at home with a family or you're on vacation or whatever, yeah, give me my supplements. I want to feel like this, right? But at work, use this. It is your superpower, right? So understand context is important. Your genes don't change. So your genes that you have are the genes that you die with. You're born with them, you die with them. What changes is their expression, and that's what we meant by, like, if you go in the sauna, bad BDNF works a little harder. If you take the right supplement, we can augment the gene expression to help you feel better. So it's the expression that changes, the gene never changes. TPH is a gene that is a cofactor to serotonin and BDNF. It's basically the tryptophan gene, that chemical that we get from Turkey, right? So and so it's just a cofactor or a what do you call it? A co-star to these two genes, and can augment a little bit how they operate. Yeah, so epigenetics do not edit genes, they regulate their expression. Correct, from Mike. So the gene is as it is. And what does that mean? It means so long as you are doing this thing, you are either up-regulating or down-regulating that gene, but you've never changed it. So as soon as you stop doing this thing, it goes back to status quo, what you were born with. That's gene expression. I can manage how I feel by changing expression, by adding this habit, but the day I stop, my gene goes back to what it was before, because that's the foundational level I was given. Sometimes it doesn't match. Parallel theories even doing, but I have LL, you said you'd be good for legal work. I know there's other reports too. So there's two answers there. The answer of what are you doing epigenetically, right? That may be augmenting that. What does your diet look like? Are you very careful with your gut? There's also cofactors of what does your GSTM1 gene look like? And how well does your gut detoxify? Because, okay, you're managing your serotonin levels as appropriate for the stimulus that's happening. But if your gut is unhealthy and you can't make enough, then that may be the cause of your dysregulation, right? So this is where being functional in the approach, and we're going to, by the way, join us for all 4 calls. The intention was there's no way to do this in this group setting other than going through each section. But after we go through all 4 sections, the story is going to be a little more interwoven, right? Because one system affects another system, affects another system. And you'll see that by the time we've gone through the end, including what we just said. If your FUT2 gene is off, FUT2, FUT2 gene, then you don't do a good job of making digestive enzymes for plants and beans and legumes. So that may be the reason why your serotonin is off, because your gut is off. If you're not sleeping properly because your circadian rhythm is broken. So there's other cofactors to why serotonin is off. So you do a good job of managing it, but you may not be making enough to manage, right? And we can get into that. Yes, is recording. Sawdust, I don't remember what you were talking about, but I don't remember saying sawdust. Not sure what that was. Infrared better than standard. So for the purpose of BDNF, no. So infrared sauna is good because it supports your mitochondria. That red light stimulates mitochondrial, what we call mitophagy, new mitochondria, growing the existing mitochondria, but it does not have the intensity or effect on your BDNF of a traditional sauna. A traditional sauna is better. The other challenge with infrared is sometimes your head is sticking out of them. It's like a sort of a zip up thing that you're in. You need your head. You may have seen people go into saunas with a sauna cap because it allows you to stay in there longer. You actually don't want that. You want the discomfort. So the first 10 minutes of sauna is, this feels amazing. I'm on a holiday. After that, it gets uncomfortable. That discomfort is when all the repair starts happening, right? That's when the blood starts flowing like crazy. That's when the blood surges and like, this is a problem. I need more BDNF. I need to repair my brain. And that's what ends up happening. So you don't start getting the benefit until you're 10 minutes in. And so a minimum 20 minutes and not more than 40. Because when you're doing more than 40 with no sauna cap, you could get you could pass out. You could have another mood issue, the converse of that. So it's 20 to 40 minutes and 3 times a week minimum. Every day is great, but if you want a therapeutic benefit, it's 3 times a week minimum. SAMe speeds up some neurochemicals, right? We use it to help people speed up their COMT. So some people that have poor methylation, it helps with that because COMT is the tail end of methylation. And we're going to talk about that again on the methylation call. So we would recommend that for clearance of neurochemicals so that you're not stuck in stimulus for long, right? If you clear faster, then the poor outcome isn't as impactful. But when it comes to BDNF, it's much more beneficial to upregulate it than it is to try and get out of it. Dopamine, ADRA2B clearance is important. With BDNF, it's more about let's upregulate it because there's also the brain health component, right? The reports don't spell it out. So the reports, we are saying as much as we're allowed to say. Keep in mind, Health Canada, FDA has very clear regulatory requirements on what we're allowed to say and not allowed to say, right? So there's certain things that are considered diagnostic in nature. There's many things that I've said tonight that we're not allowed to give you direct to consumer, not allowed to say to you specifically, unless you've been intaken as a patient, which we do. We have a clinic where we can intake any one of you and work with you clinically. But there's certain things we're just not allowed to say, right? High dose sauna blanket gives the same benefits. The sauna blanket typically is red light. And same thing, yeah, there's some benefit, but it's nowhere near the same as getting into a traditional sauna. Gail, if you have leaky gut issues, resolve first before experience. Yeah, so yes, fix your leaky gut. BioOptimizers makes a really cool product. It's called Biome something. It's a larger container. It's not a capsule in a typical bottle. It's a large, round, flat container. It's a powder that you scoop. And you take it on an empty stomach once a day for some number of months, and it will likely repair your leaky gut. It's a great product. Again, I don't know the full name. It's Biome something. It's a larger container and it's a scoop of powder, and you'll see it. It talks about leaky gut repairs. It's a great product for that, from BioOptimizers. So to change the gene question, can I change my serotonin dysregulation gene? You can't change a gene, but you can change your epigenetic expression, which is I'm going to take a deep calm supplement. I'm going to take 5-HTP. I'm going to fix my gut. I'm going to sleep better. These are the things you can do to improve it. The other things you should do is put yourself in the right context to use it to your advantage. Start reading, start studying, start researching, start using your superpower. A lot of people that have mood issues are because they're misaligned in context. So put yourself in the right context. Infrared we talked about already. I guess sauna, because 200,000 years ago we didn't use air conditioning. Yeah, we used to sweat for sure. So now this is very important, that number, 200,000 years. Use this in the context of everything you're thinking about. Our DNA is somewhere between 200 to 250,000 years old. Our current modern habits are less than 200 years old. Modern agriculture is only 10,000 years old. So modern civilization agriculture. So we are wired for habits of 250,000 years, most of which is not even modern agriculture and civilized. It's caveman habits, which is why we're all so sick, because we don't do those things. We don't walk on the ground. We don't live in the sun. We don't hunt for animals. We don't climb up trees and break our legs. And, we don't do things that our ancestors did. And so we are experiencing chronic inflammation all the time because of that. Deletions, yeah. So the way it's passed on is mom has a copy, dad has a copy. So if you have LS serotonin, dad has LS, then the child has the options of getting LL, LS, SS, because you both. So whatever copies you have, it's kind of a Russian roulette of which copy do you give the child, and they get one from each parent, and that's really how it's passed on. So it's not so much a mutation; it's more like copy, 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 and that's why we haven't changed. Our DNA hasn't evolved in 250,000 years. It's just a pass on of these same options, and it keeps just, going around, and then we come generation after generation, we kind of repeat the pattern over time. What is a gene we talk about, which defines if you're coachable or not, which alleles are coachable? So coachable is if your BDNF is off, there's something to be said about ego and insecurity. So when your BDNF is off, we find there's a lot of ego, and it's driven by insecurity, because you've learned over time that it's harder for you to learn. And you've also learned over time you're really good at what you're good at, but you're really bad at what you're not good at. And that leads to this lack of coachability. You have to learn experientially, you have to go through it. And that's what happens. There's also the slow comped, right? The GG comped, which is, I'm not moving quickly. I kind of get stuck. And I'll say yes, 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 but I'm not actually going to do it. I'll only do, and if you pair that with the GGDRD2, it's not only that I take longer, but I also get stuck in the things I'm interested in. So I don't ever get to the things I'm not interested in. So when a coach says, here's the 5 things you need to do this week, I'm only going to do the one I care about. And the other 4, I may not even start. I'm going to think I did them, but I never really did them. So those are the 2 big areas where we see coachability can be a challenge, but if you understand that, then you know how to structure it, right? We already talked about serotonin dysregulation. Why is it changed? My original report had DRD2 AG. So GG. The only thing I could say about that is that depending on the timing, our new lab with better, more modern equipment launched sometime late last year. And so the sequencing technology improves over time. And so things that are like at the borderline, because it's not, by the way, sequencing is much more complex than you would think. It's not as easy as I have this version of the gene, I have an ARG. To get to that is very difficult. And so the technology we have today is better than it was before. And so in a few places, you may see an improvement in the call, as we say. What do we actually call it when it was on the borderline? We're going to call it this instead of this. And that has a lot to do with the work that we do with Illumina and the sequencing technology. And we did launch a new lab line, a new line of equipment. So microdosing does definitely support mood and behavior complications. It helps you with neurodevelopment. It helps you release trauma. It helps you elevate your consciousness if you believe that that's what's happening, which allows you to overcome the consciousness level at which the trauma actually was a problem versus I don't even care about that anymore, right? So definitely we have seen benefit in it. I haven't done it. We don't recommend it as a product, but I have seen over and over again people that I've worked with that do it, that it is definitely beneficial. I have seen it over and over again. So MAO we didn't talk about. It is somewhat of a supporting character to the dopamine pathway. And it's, if somebody is on an extreme, that's when we start to look at it, because what it does, it's an in between. So DRD2 is to what degree do I feel it? COMT is how long did it last? And MAO is kind of in between COMT and DRD2, breaking it down, getting ready for COMT to come along and clean it up, right? So if your MAO is fast, it's linked to things like depression. Funny thing is that it's linked to things like serial killers, because there's this weird study done where, you know, they just don't hold on to the feeling for long and make their decisions a lot quicker, so they can sort of plow through problematic scenarios. And so it's a pull factor. So if you find you're on one of the extremes, then you would also look at your MAO to see, are you even being pushed further in one direction or the other, right? Or are you being pulled back, a kind of a saving grace? That's when we start to look at it, right? We just talked about Mao. So GT, you're right in the middle. So again, it's not impactful at that point. It's a sort of Zen appropriate clearance. Magnesium, I usually take it at night before I go to sleep, to answer that question. Relaxes your muscles. It also helps you sleep. Biglycinate, threonate, they're both great. But usually I take it in the evening. If I'm heavy training, I might take it twice, like if I'm doing a heavy weightlifting day. Can results identify if someone maybe on the autism spectrum? Yes. Oh, Shalini, hey, how are you doing? What not so much on the spectrum. So keep in mind, there's autism, which is an innate condition that you're born with, right? You know that this child has a behavioral development issue. Then there's, my kid changed, right? My kid doesn't behave the same. They don't look at me the same way. What happened? That is, by the way, the majority, right? We're talking about today, 90-ish% of what we call autism, if not more. So what's happening there is you look at, and there's another day where we're going to talk about that. This is more of a detox and methylation issue, inability to deal with environmental toxins and the neural inflammation that's caused, and it's less of a mood and behavior issue. So we're going to talk about that on that day to make sure we get through all of these mood and behavior questions. So we talked about Mao, different goals, very useful. Thank you, Arnaud, for getting into that. 2 gene variants of predisposed to serotonin, GT. I am wondering what's the best dose and frequency of HTP. So 5-HTP, you can actually take it multiple times a day. So now, depending what's happening in your day, if you feel that you're at work and it's your superpower, you may just take it once in the morning just to cut the edge, right? If you're at home with the family, you might take it 3 times a day because you want to maintain that calm, right? So, and the context where it's beneficial is where you need that high propensity towards detail orientation, you know, where I'm analyzing, learning, speaking, whatever it is, right? So that's where the context is beneficial, and the dosage is again based on the need. Work day, take it once. Family day, relaxing day, vacation day, 3 times, right? So different dosing. So Lisa eats well but does not sleep. So we're going to talk about that on the sleep day, and we're going to talk about how serotonin affects that, just to make sure we get through all the mood questions. Husband has a TBI, no depression, just mania. Yeah, so if he has a TBI, we will work with BDNF to figure out what's going on there. So would this DNA report be interpreted in a different way given that context? So if his BDNF is off, that would explain a lot. If his BDNF is not off, there's more work needed. So if BDNF is AA, which likely what you're describing, it would explain exactly what's going on there. He's not recovering. And so there's support needed in terms of, you know, neural pathway development, and there's supplements that are required there, treatments like sauna, maybe oxygen, different things that you could do. That I would say needs coaching, needs clinical work. If his BDNF is not off, yes, there's other answers to why this would be happening. But again, that requires it's not a quick answer. That requires intake, understanding lifestyle, understanding a lot of pieces to the puzzle to give you an appropriate roadmap. Tina loves the deep calm. Is dopamine a reason why some become obsessive? Yes, so there's multiple reasons for becoming obsessive. If your dopamine pathway is off in combination, when I say off, AA, too fast, in combination with serotonin dysregulation, so you're reward seeking, you can't get no satisfaction, and you're seeing every little detail and nuance, and you're unable to filter stimulus, that leads to what we call a high functioning anxiety. So this drive, everything matters, fire in my gut. Nobody ever gets it right. Nobody can do it the way I do it, right? That's how you feel in that context. And you become obsessive about every little detail because it really matters. And you notice the details and you're frustrated. It's a never ending loop because the other people around you don't see the details that way. And you're always disappointed. And it leads to this high functioning anxiety. So we have to teach CEOs and leadership people often who end up in those roles because of that high functioning anxiety, that the world sees the world at 80% of the way they see the world. And you have to accept that and understand that everyone has their part to play in this organization. And you go ahead and have your high functioning anxiety and remember every little detail, but remember, it's only going to ever get executed at 80% because you're seeing it at 120, right? So that's one thing that leads to that. Can someone tell where's the explanation found for each letter? That's in your gene cast. So we split it up. The way we recommend going through this is listen to the gene cast first, which tells you about the genes. And then when you get to the reports, you're fully armed to interpret them. So in the gene, and we separate it very purposefully because there's some people that are like, I just want to geek out and understand the genes and I'll figure out the rest. I don't need your reports. And there's some people like, tell me about anxiety, tell me what supplements to take, tell me what the problem is, and they need the reports and they don't want to know about the genes. So we split them so that you can have either experience, but we recommend both is ideal. So what is your TPH? Your TPH is that cofactor to BDNF, and TT is the suboptimal version, which means that your serotonin may be more dysregulated if you have serotonin dysregulation, but this is good for BDNF, so it's good to have the TT for BDNF. TPH is in the mood and behavior section. If you go to the summary, it should be right above BDNF. TPH, PubMed that explains that people with mold exposures have certain genetic awakening after taking 5-HTP. Yeah, so people that have mold exposures. So what happens is serotonin is a precursor to, like, your serotonin makes your melatonin, which then makes you sleep, which then makes your serotonin. So it's this vicious circle, right? And mold exposure and the inflammation from the mycotoxins disrupts your sleep. And so you get out of that vicious circle by being able to sleep better, by having a better mood, by reducing neural inflammation. Remember, all these systems are interconnected, so one affects the other. If you're stressed and you're already inflamed from mold, then you have a double whammy for inflammation. So it would make sense that if you resolve one problem, your body has this bucket of a total threshold of problems it can handle. Mold toxins, hormone toxins, pesticides in the grass, stress, lack of sleep, and you can handle some. It's when the total load is too much that something starts to express. And the total load could have been from one thing or from a combination of many things. And that's why if you fix one thing, another thing might start to feel better because the total load got reduced. Sauna we talked about. So ADRA to be ID means that you're more of a functional EQ. So it's not quite the DD where it's like true PTSD. It's more like emotionally intelligent, empathy. It's a functional tool. And the MAO TT, well, first I'll speak to the serotonin. So serotonin is more like I'm more macro thinking. I am big picture. I'm not really bothered by the details, right? Which is helpful in terms of relationships and being zen. but it's problematic when it comes to trying to understand the details, right? Mao TT is the slow clearance, right? So this is the person who holds on to pleasure and reward for longer. So GG is a fast, TT is a slow. So if this is paired with slow comped, then you're ultra slow. If this is paired with fast comped, then you're mitigating it a little bit, right? Gene expressions like subroutines of Peter program. Oh, okay. Yes, instead of Sonic or Sawdust. Yes, that's right. So Mike's dropped some wisdom bombs here tonight. There's been a couple comments from him that are explaining things really well. So I would read his comment. It's the feedback loop which changes the gene expression. Exactly right on, right? Yes, it's recorded. Is there a library of videos we can access to offer these types of explanations? So what there is the GeneCast, which does speak to what we're describing here today. The reason we did this, so I can get granular and say things that are clinical that we're not allowed to say, and you just give you more value, right? But there is a library of video, which is more anecdotal, where there's stories. We have not published it anywhere, but we likely can. So thank you for pointing that out. We have a bunch of video we shot on various case studies that we use to train clinicians, but we can make that publicly available. So no GSTT, one GSTM1, best way to support it. So GSTM1 is gut. So you need to focus on not only serotonin support, but also detox support. We have a product called Detox Optimizer, which you should be taking. If you have no GSTT1, so GSTT drives your glutathione pathway, but if you have no or one GSTT1, if you don't have the two, if it's 1 or 0, then glutathione directly is not the best option for you because your body doesn't instruct it properly, right? So you need more precursors. NAC is probably the best one. Glycine, selenium, these are all common detox supplements you've heard of. We make a cocktail called Detox Optimizer that has them all in it. But if you already have a brand that you like or a product you've seen that is a liver support product, that's what you should be taking in combination with the serotonin support. At what heat? I don't actually know the number, to be honest. I go to a gym where it's already preset and it's perfect. And I don't know what that perfect number is. I have to actually find out for you. So if you don't mind, email that question to client care and I'll get the answer. I have the LL gene, but I find myself noticing a lot of detail around me described as so that could be, keep in mind the language that I use versus what you're feeling. There may be some disconnect there also. You may look at your comped. So is your comped fast? In which case you may be more reward seeking and more sort of bouncing around and jumping around, right? It could be dopamine is slow or high, sorry, the GG, in which case you're more anxious and more looking at everything and understanding, but it's a very different experience than LS, which is called burdensome. It's a high level of detail orientation. It could be BDNF is off, where all of a sudden things mean a lot, so you're catching on to them, right? The things that you're paying attention to, you think you see more, but there may be things you're not seeing that other people do. Yeah, when dry versus steam, we're not talking about a steam room. That's not the same thing. A sauna, your traditional sauna with hot rocks, right? You can throw some water on there and steam it. You can even throw some essential oils on there, which gives you a sense of stress relief, but we're not talking about a steam room. Yes, this is recorded. Amalgam fillings with your mercury. I didn't know there was a connection there. If you have mercury fillings, heating them, I don't know what the connection is. First of all, get them out of your mouth and replace it with, there's holistic dentists now in most major cities that can use a ceramic or something clean. You don't want to have mercury in your mouth, right? So that's step one, change it, spend the money, focus. This is a very important part of your health. Replace it with ceramic or something clean. Steam shower is not the same benefit. Yes, the book. So Graziella has received our book. By the way, our book just launched yesterday, The DNA Way. It's me walking through my story of healing myself by using my genetic code. And yes, there is a chart. By the way, a few people asked about a chart. The book actually has a chart for each one of the genes, or each one of the systems, I should say. So it's in there. Sorry, Q&A, I haven't even gone there yet. There's still 99 questions in the chat. So we're going through that first, then we'll go to the Q&A part. There are questions there, I saw them. Improves my low soy social. So soy products, so the thing about soy is it can augment hormone levels. So if you're already having mood issues from serotonin, I would avoid estrogen and hormone mimics, because estrogenization, estrogen dominance also leads to anxiety and mood issues. So I would avoid them. I would reduce estrogenic foods if you're having serotonin issues. Adolescent experience. How do you get an adolescent who has high density to be motivated? They need structure. They aren't motivated, right? First of all, you need to find the thing that they truly enjoy, that really does give them that elevated sense of, and you'll probably find that that same child, the thing that they like, they'll never stop doing. So you need to give them structure, which means they're not going to do it. They're not going to be motivated to do it on their own. There has to be a schedule. There has to be a reward. There has to be a carrot and a stick, right? And there has to be that you don't get to do this if you don't do this. So that child just needs a lot more structure. And why do I say structure? Because management is too much. That's a burnout for you. Structure allows you to be hands-off. It has to be done like this. Then there's an alarm on your phone that's set for homework time. Go, right? They need structure. So Linda's comped AA DRD2 GG. So fast clearance and high dopamine, which makes sense, which is like I am able to say no and focus on my job, but I'm able to shift gears because my comp is quick. How about PMF? PMF is awesome. So pulse electric magnetic frequency to repair cells and mitigate all of what we're exposed to today. Not so much for eliminating toxins, but for making the cells more resilient to cope with toxins. So you need to do both. It's not just one. You also need to focus on detoxing, not just that. Biome breakthrough. Thank you, Arnaud. Red light therapy, again, we just talked about that. Good for the health of the cell, not good for detox or brain. It is good for BDNF, I believe. It elevates it. And it is good for mitochondria. And there's a high level of density of mitochondria in your brain. So it helps with brain longevity. 0 GSTM1 and 1 copy of GS. So similar thing, except now food becomes more important. So you have 0 copies of GSTM1. GSTM1 is the detox of the gut. And we're going to talk about that on the detox call, but you need to hyper focus on food. Grounding mats are PEMF. That's what we just talked about. Amazon repair powder. Well, I'll go back to that link after, just because if I go there, I'm going to jump out of this webinar. So we'll go back to that link after. I'm not familiar with CGRP. Hot tub will boost BDNF levels, not to a therapeutic level. It's more like I'm going to have a good mood today, but it's not therapeutic like a sauna, right? Temperature, I said I will get for you. Somebody send a note to client care, send an email, and I will get that. EMF blocking devices, yes, for cellular health. Everybody should have one in your home, given today's reality, and everybody should be wearing something when you're outside combating 5G, which is bad for your heart, bad for your nervous system, bad for inflammation. Everybody should have an EMF blocking device. It's a yes, mandatory yesterday. Yes, there's a replay. Thank you. Yes, beneficial. Great intel. You're welcome. A recording will be emailed automatically. Speak to BDNF GT and TPH TT. So you are considered optimal. You have the best BDNF and the not so good TPH, which does not epistatically affect the BDNF. So you have great neuroplasticity, great mood, great skill development, right? Where you may not have a benefit is that hyper focused subject matter expert dive deep. You may not do that as well, right? Your emails are probably 3 words as opposed to 5 paragraphs. You know, it's like high level, not deep dive. But depending on the context, that may be exactly what you need. So yes, there are some genes that are, even we've seen this phenomenon of somebody got a gene version that neither mom or dad gave them. This is few and far between, very rare, but sometimes, very rarely, you'll see in a gene variant pop up, but it's still one, it's not evolution, it's not the genes changing, it's still one of the possible options. So we're not evolving, we're just mutating between the options that are existing. So there's no new options. Very rarely, but sometimes we'll see that happen when mom and dad didn't get the option. LL is the optimal version of 5-HTP, which means 5-HTP-LPR, which means high level macro, less detail, less irritable, less distractible. I can focus. Mood is more as appropriate as it should be. I'm not up and down. I'm more in the middle. A key, so there is one in the book. Somebody pointed that out. We do have a key that we use for research. We're going to share that. So again, drop a note in the client care email and we'll share that. If you have the book, it's in there. We'll share that. There's no list on the website. Not sure if my facts are correct, but I think okay. If you have AG and you're between AA slow and clear GT5, yeah. So yes, for COMT, yes, it's right in the middle, which is the ideal speed, which does not create problems, but it also doesn't create benefits. You're not highly reward seeking. You're also not a binger that does deep work. You just do it as it should be. Diet and sleep, it shows optimal part. So that is BDNF. So I'm more likely to think about hypothetical situations so I don't sleep. When your serotonin and BDNF are dysregulated, the brain spins. It's this hamster wheel effect, the shell shock. I can't stop thinking about it, right? And that's where you need to focus on these two things. So look at your serotonin and your BDNF, see which one is off, and then focus on fixing that. MAOTT is the slow version, which means that you break down your dopamine a little slower. You then need to look at your COMT to see, is it functional? Is it augmenting your COMT? Or is it pairing with a slow COMT, which now means super slow? Or is it a fast COMT, which means you're mitigating that a little bit? You're welcome. I see a thank you there. I see another thank you. And thank you about the book. Congratulations. I see a congrats. Thank you. Oh, so you got your book. You're one of the first in the world, by the way, because yesterday was day 1. So they got it delivered. This is Sarah. Yes, the recording will be sent out. This is live. We're recording it live, and yes, you'll get another copy sent to you. There's an issue with my reports. Not sent for 3 months. According to, I was not notified by the system. I logged in, and okay. So this issue of I logged in and my reports were there, but I didn't get notified. We've seen a few things. Some people unsubscribe because they get marketing emails and they stop, or it goes to spam, or there's these weird anomalies where the email doesn't come. 1 in 1,000 people, but it happens. If you want to speak to someone else, I'm going to drop an email in here. Our chief operating officer. In fact, I'll give you an email for our chief technology officer, because she can work on fixing the problem, right? And she will first of all support you, but she'll also work on fixing whatever the problems you're finding. So I'm dropping that in here. That's our CTO. And I got to go back. Every time I type something, it takes me way down. I got to find where I left off. Sorry. Where were we? I have to just find where we left off. Getting close. Here we are. Okay. You are the best. I agree. Thank you for all you do. And that's how humble I am. Enjoy the book, Nicole. Thank you so much. Can't wait to read the book. Yeah, enjoy the book. You're gonna love it. Thank you. Lou, I had so many issues with my report. Haven't got a response over the phone or email. So that same email that I just dropped, this is for Lou. I have had issues with my report, haven't gotten a response with the phone or email. I'm not sure what's going on there. We have a full client care team. There's something getting lost there in cyberspace. Email Wendy. She's our CTO. She's not the customer service person. She is truly the technology person. I'm just trying to make sure that whatever piece is broken there, that everybody gets that fixed. We want everyone to have a great experience. So if there's something broken there, we'll fix it. And also we'll make sure whatever your issue is gets dealt with. Psoriasis, I had psoriasis. I don't have it anymore. I had it most of my adult life. It's gone. Psoriasis is different than eczema. Eczema is inflammation. Psoriasis is autoimmunity, right? So I had that because of being exposed to toxic chemicals in my workplace. Got to the point where my body just started fighting itself. And so I developed psoriasis, and to the point where if I were to clasp my hands like this, my knuckles would all be bleeding. That's how cracked up they were. I haven't had it in years since I started fixing myself. Oh, sorry, Neil has dropped his email in there already. I didn't see that. So drop a line to email. Drop an email to Neil. He's available. He'll triage things properly. So Wendy may be surprised to get your email and think that it's some sort of spam. So Neil is here with us tonight. So email him and he'll support you. Hey, Mary's here. Thank you for joining us. You know what? I've had that comment before. Neil, if you're listening, this is something to work on. So the Genecast, I'm the same as you, Mary. My brain moves a little too quick, so I want to speed it up. And no, it doesn't have that capacity yet. It's custom built into our portal. So what we're thinking is to build it into an existing playback tool so that we can adjust the speed. And you're right, that is an improvement that's required. So we are going to work on that. Neil, let's just make a note of that. Moderate is a good place to be, because depending on when we're talking about mood and behavior, because you're in the middle, and depending on your context, you can swing in the direction you need to be. You can use the reward seeking behavior. You can slow down and examine things a little before taking a move. So it's a great place to be. Unless you need the extreme. Are you planning to climb Mount Kilimanjaro? You need to be able to fight through the elements. Well, then you probably need to be a little more reward seeking. So it's a good foundational place to be, but you can augment gene expression with supplements if you need to. There's some recommendations here on for sauna temperature. Arnaud is a known biohacker. So if he's saying 82 degrees, I would agree with him. That feels right. 82 sounds like the right temperature when I hear it. So try that. I do remember hearing 78 from somebody a few times. I remember hearing that in different podcasts and such, and a little hotter wouldn't hurt you. So 82 sounds right. Dr. Mercola apparently says 180. Somebody just dropped in here. And Dr. Mercola probably would speak to extremes. So if he's saying 180, a normal human like everybody here probably would say 170, so which gene, estrogen. So we're going to have an entire separate talk about hormones. Keep in mind today, mood and behavior. We want to make sure everyone that has mood and behavior questions has those answered, right? Now the hormone, we will have an entire talk on hormones, and we're never going to stop doing this, by the way. No cost, forever. We're going to continue having these calls for you to continue learning. For anyone that's been to one, there's going to be a lot of repeat. You're going to hear the same thing over again, but you're welcome to join us again if you'd like. And there will be one for hormones also. So we'll answer those questions on that day. Yes, the Unpilled podcast that we host is another way for you to learn. So go listen to it. You'll enjoy it. You'll love the information there. And then you can drill into specific topics. So I try and bring on experts I'm not so concerned about how famous and popular they are. I'm more concerned about how much they know. So I'm trying to pull in people that have a lot of knowledge. And you'll see when you go there that you can use your report to solve problems, because the podcast is more long format to solve problems. So that's a good thought. Go there. Xenoestrogens can be problematic. We're going to talk to that in the estrogen, the hormone call, I should say. Infrared sauna, again, we commented on this, great for cellular health, not the best for, it does the job, but not the same as a traditional dry sauna. Okay, so it does the job, but not the same. Now, if that's the only option you have, use it. It's better than zero, but it's not as good. If you have the option of a traditional sauna, use that. Glutathione and NAC, it's the GST family. So GSTT1, GSTM1, GSTP1, the glutathione genes. Yeah, so we're not talking about that today. We're going to talk about that. That's why you didn't see it in the gene summary. It's going to be in the immunity section, the immunity and methylation section. Very specifically, there's a glutathione report. It's in there. Somebody else got their book. Amazing. Ionic detox. Are you talking about the ionic foot baths? They do work. There's some conspiracy theory around there. I've talked to people like, so Dr. I think it's Christine Schaffner, incredible naturopath, brilliant woman. She told me and taught me how they work, and they do. So I didn't believe it to be true, because you get through this experience of like all this guck coming out of your feet doesn't seem reasonable, but they work. They truly work. Someone just got their book right now while they were on the webinar. Amazing. Somebody has really bad detox. I don't know. Andrew W has 0 GSTT1, 0 GSTM1, and AG minus 50% GSTP1. You need to be managing your liver. That is a foundational thing for your health plan. You don't detox. You are not designed for today's reality. Today's reality is toxic, from EMF to chemicals to food to stress to everything. You need to be constantly, never ending, supporting your liver health. It's a daily thing for you. Sabrina got the Audible version. So by the way, that's my voice. I spent 3 days in the studio. And again, the way my brain works, fast comped, I need it like this. I don't read books. I read articles and summaries. It was not easy for me to read word for word a book for 3 days, even though I wrote it. I realized how my brain is actually wired when I tried to sit there for 3 days and actually read, and I had to do that. So the editing of me summarizing as I was reading, which is what my brain normally does, very challenging. So that audio book is me. What you don't hear is the pain that it took to actually record it. So emotional intelligence may come intuitive to me. That's the ADR2B. ADR2B, probably ID or DD, so more EQ. Yes, the charts are in the ebook, obviously not in the audio version, although I do say them, but you can't see them anywhere. But a print or ebook, either way. You're welcome. EMF blocking. So for wearable, Leela Quantum, L-E-E-L-A, Leela Quantum, because not only is it an EMF blocker, but there's titanium beads in the capsule that are actually charged with quantum frequency to deliver micronutrients to your cells. So if anyone here understands quantum physics, everything comes down to particles of frequency. And so when I eat a banana and the nutrition from the banana eventually gets to my cells, the method of that, the mechanism is frequency. And so when you get right down to the very minute minimalist particle, it's frequency. And so if that's what you're getting, why not just emit the frequency? So Leela Quantum does that. There's also a product called Vivo, V-I-V-O, which is a whole home device. You plug it into the wall and it negatively charges the ions, so they pass through your body as opposed to getting stuck in your cells. Harmony is a great tool. The difference between Harmony and Leela, Harmony is just the EMF. Leela also gives you the quantum nutrition. Somebody else got the book. Enjoy it. Beating up optimizer, trying to, yeah, so it's not caffeine. Keep in mind, it's the coffee fruit. There's no caffeine, there's no buzz, there's no energy, there's no caffeine. I have the worst possible caffeine metabolic pathway, and I take it before I go to sleep. Right? If I drink coffee at 4 p.m., I can't sleep at night. So there's no problem with it. It's not caffeine, it's just the language around it, but it's not caffeine. My son's report, he said it had Fox TT, looked at Fox with that. I don't understand why that would happen. That is a question for tech. Let's dig in and make sure you have the right result. First of all, is it TT or is it GG? If he is GG, then he's Superman, right? So send Neil an email. Neil's dropped his email in here a couple times. We will dig into your personal data to find out what's going on there. It may have been an update, maybe an upload error that got corrected. We'll figure out what happened there. On chapter 7, wow, high performer here. Holy cow, this is your binger. Let's look at your genetics. Whoever's on chapter 7, what does your Compton, your dopamine pathway say? Be interesting to see. I'm late. Yes, there's a recording. Cost for review, I understand, is over 500. So $500 if you're working with a functional medicine doctor, MD. Keep in mind, we have programs where we'll work with you for over a month for $1,500. That's, hours of time. We also have a subscription, which is, I think, less than $100 a month, where you can work with a nurse practitioner. So $500 is to work with a functional medicine MD. This is for somebody who is like, I don't want breast cancer. I have Lyme disease and I can't get out of bed. The average person doesn't need that. You don't need an MD who also can order blood work, who also can review your blood results, who can, who can use our EMR to pull your medical records. That's for that person, right? Marianne, again, I'll drop, well, you see Neil's email Neil again. This is where we have programs that extend from a month to 6 months, and we can dive deep from fixing one problem to examining your entire genome to fix everything, the things that you didn't even know were wrong. But we also have a subscription, which is, I think, again, between 60 to 100 some odd dollars a month, where you can have a coach that can ongoing support you. Username, that's a tech problem. Again, email Neil, that probably needs a reset. Recording available, yes, it'll be available. You're welcome. A lot of thank yous here. Text is not showing up. Did you make it to everyone? Text, I didn't. The only thing I typed so far was Wendy's email. Better to use Neil's. I haven't been typing anything since then. Don't see the email. Scroll up and down. They were typed. I saw Neil's email, but it's scrolled up. Neil, if you don't mind, just add your email in here every couple minutes just so you can catch it. Oh, someone else just got their book. Wendy's email was, scroll up a little bit. Somebody said Wendy's email, scroll up. It was right above you. FUT2 GG is the bad version, suboptimal, which means that you don't produce enzymes properly, which means that you don't metabolize B12 properly. You need B12 sublingual under your tongue. Swallowing it won't work for you. That's what, and you should not be a vegan ever. You will not survive. You will get sick. You need to be taking digestive enzymes with your food. If we go back to BioOptimizers, they make a product called Masszymes, which will really help you. Celsius, 82 was Celsius, and I think 180 was the Fahrenheit. 180 Celsius, and you would be a pool of something, you'd be cooked. So how do you work towards it? So there's the people that get dizzy, you have to slow down movement and get it's a breath work question. So you have to be able to work with your breath in order to get into a parasympathetic state and calm the nervous system down. So if it's more of a heat thing, you just got to do it. Do 5 minutes and 6 minutes and 7 minutes and learn to do it. But if it's just like dizziness that people get, or it's just like discomfort, or I start breathing heavy, you need to do breathing exercises. You need to do some conscious breathing, mindful breathing. There's a lot of videos on YouTube you can watch and learn how to control through your breath the parasympathetic and keep your heart rate down. And that allows you to stay in it for longer. Inflammation will be the immunity call. You're going to enjoy that one. The podcast is called Unpilled, just to answer your question, Unpilled. Oh, somebody answered that already. Dr. Klinghardt is amazing. Somebody dropped his name here. I've had the pleasure of dealing with him twice in my life, but incredible person. Where do I get the book? The book, you can go to thednaway.com. It's now in stores. You can actually just go to Amazon, Barnes and Noble. It's in physical stores as well, depending where you are. The DNA Way was a website we had set up for pre-order, but you can just go directly to Amazon or Barnes and Noble or wherever you typically buy your books. It's available everywhere. EarthCom, I'm not familiar with, sorry. Leela. It's Leela Quantum, Leela, Leela. Does fasting help boost BDNF? Yeah, so fasting helps neurogenesis. So it helps with one of the symptoms of poor BDNF. Fasting also helps mitophagy, developing new mitochondria. So these are two problems that are the outcome of poor BDNF. So if you have bad BDNF, you're going to have a problem with brain mitochondria and neural development. So fasting helps these two things. So it's a good thing to mitigate the poor outcome of bad BDNF. EarthCom from EMF, I haven't seen it. Most EMF blockers are great, EMF blockers, so I just haven't seen that one. Blue Shield, yes, I've seen Blue Shield. I haven't seen their whole home product. I've seen products that they make for like your devices that seem to work well, but I don't know much about their whole home. No, it's not covered by OHIP. Most of the work we do is in the US. What we can do is some of our naturopathic doctors are Canadian. I'm Canadian, we're in Toronto. And so if you specifically request this, again, send an email to Neil. We can see about getting your, sorry, not OHIP, but employment insurance to cover it. Other than that, no OHIP. Unfortunately, OHIP only covers managing disease, not preventing and reversing it. Yeah, so in the future, Q&A, yeah, I agree with you. That's a good point. If we put the Q&A into the questions, that allows us to manage it better. So we'll do that. So the programs, I think you already got your answer. Email Neil, and we'll get intake person to talk to you about that. But yeah, we'll get someone to talk to you. Email Neil about the programs. You're welcome. I'm just scrolling through. Vegan FUT2, FUT2. We just talked about that. You want to look at that in a GG, you're not going to do well. So B12 sublingual, under the tongue. If your FUT2 is GG or AG, you should not be swallowing your B12 into your gut. You should be taking it under your tongue. If my GSTM is 0, how is it possible that my daughter is 2? So this is one of those anomalies where and I don't know the technical language to this. If you send an email again to Neil, we'll just put all the emails to Neil just so that they're all in one place. I can send you a report on this really strange phenomenon that happens where copy number variations can vary in your children. And it happens specifically in the GSTM1 and GSTT genes. We don't see it regularly, but it does happen. And I don't know the word, again, the technical word of what this variant is called, but it does happen. It's rare, and I can send you a presentation about it. We put a presentation about it to explain it, because it does happen to some people and it's very confusing. Like, how could I possibly have given a copy that I don't have, right? It does happen, very rare, but we can explain it to you. If you send an email, I'll send you the presentation about it. Appointment, again, email Neil, and then we can get you into coaching. So there's no consult included, which is why we're doing exactly what we're doing here today. So we can't include a consult. Our test, the way we do it, it's not a high margin product like a lot of the other products out there. So we can't afford to actually include a consult with a functional genomics practitioner who's actually trained and understands and knows the way we think and that could deliver value. And that's exactly why we set this up, and we're going to continue doing this forever so that you can get your questions answered. The audio book, I think I read out the gene breakdown. I read it word for word, so you won't see it, but it's there. DD is in relation to ADRA2B, AG is in relation to dopamine. Recording you'll automatically get. Okay, well, I didn't think that was going to happen, but I reached the bottom. Now I'll go to the Q&A. There's a lot of questions here. Okay, some of these are going to be repeat. They were probably asked in the chat. We answered this. Your reports in this webinar are so helpful. I'm GG and TPH and BDNF. My memory is so poor. How do you explain that? I really don't remember a person's name. So that's the thing. So if your neuroplasticity is off, then you don't do a good job with developing new neural pathways and developing that little thing to deposit the memory into. So you should really be doing all the things we talked about. Whole fruit coffee extract. You can go to our website, BDNF Optimizer, sauna, breathing exercises, low intensity exercise like yoga, really good for BDNF. So you need to adopt those practices. We talked about some of these already. TPH and DT. Yeah, the female hormone cycle is completely different than the male hormone cycle. So there would have been no justice done if we just said, here's the genetic answer, which is what most genetic companies don't do. Is like, no, here's the genetic answer in the context of the body that you're walking around in, where you can actually apply this knowledge. So it's very important to do it that way. I see a lot of repeat questions. Yes, you can get a recording. How does RNA play out? So RNA is a whole other subject to talk about. That's a messenger. So it's more like the communication between these various jobs. It's not implicit here. We're not talking about that. We do believe that the way that gene therapy is moving, the things we identify, for example, my BDNF is off, so I have to go in the sauna and I have to take this supplement every day. We do believe the day is coming where there will be a gene therapy where you take a shot and for 2 years, your BDNF will just express properly. That's coming, right? So that's where RNA technology is being interwoven into genetics. We're the company that's identifying the targets. What do you actually need to fix? And then there's a lot of biotechs that are building that technology, but how do you fix it, right? So hold on to things is the AA suboptimal BDNF, so takes a lot of meaning. So we answered some of these. Oh, is this theory that a repetitive behaviors of autism are linked to the pleasure? So we can address that for sure. We're going to speak more to causation, like why is it that innate cellular health is a path or a protection against autism. MTHFR is not the vegan gene, it's a FUT2, so FUT2. MTHFR is less implicit unless you're eating inflammatory foods, and then you're going to cause yourself inflammation by having the poor MTHFR, right? Age limit, no, anyone. I mean, my daughter's 5. As long as they can spit in a tube, your DNA doesn't change. You're born with it, you die with it. So as long as we can get their saliva. And if it's a child with behavioral development issues, we actually have a kit that has a sponge so the parent can draw the DNA out. Just let us know that you need that. So serotonin short means that the receptor is short, which means that you're less able to manage your mood as appropriate for the stimulus that's happening. So you bounce up and down, right? So you're more, it almost appears to be a bipolar response. What it is you're giving attention in every direction. We talked about this, we talked about this. Heat intolerance. So there's a gene called UCP1, which we test for, but we don't report on because it's more clinical in nature, and it speaks to thermal regulation. And if you have ideal thermal regulation, then you may heat up faster, right? If you're inflamed, then your body may not respond well to that type of input, right? So it could be any number of things. I would say attend both the hormones and inflammation and immunity webinars, and there may be something there. But there's also UCP1, which is thermal regulation. So, which may cause you to be sort of warmer on average. Nothing else sort of stands out to me, but I would say immunity and hormones, attend those two, and there may be an answer there. We answered this. I never got the results of my genes. Does that mean you didn't get them ever, or you're not in the report, you're not able to navigate it? Again, email that question to Neil. We'll make sure that tech helps you with that. Yes, the book goes into this level of detail. I talk about myself so it's kind of me telling my story in this level of detail. Yes, it's not coffee and BDNF, it's just a coffee extract. So melatonin works great for some people who can't fall asleep. So it helps them fall asleep, but most people, that's not their problem. It's that they can't stay asleep. And we're going to talk about that in the sleep webinar. Seizures is inflammation. We have to reduce neural inflammation, which we're going to talk about in the immunity and inflammation webinar. Yes, you'll get a recording. Flashback or trauma, that's Adru 2B, and how you retain negative stimulus. And you want to then focus on also looking at BDNF, and you give that stuff a lot of meaning, and you can up and down regulate BDNF. FUT2 is in the immunity section under methylation. Okay, there's a few more questions that popped up here. Yes, we're going to do one for each, and we're going to continue doing them. So we're going to ongoing forever, as long as we need to. They're going to be regularly scheduled webinars on these same 4 topics, and they're just going to keep rotating. So if you feel like you didn't get enough information, you can come back to the next mood and behavior webinar. We're going to repeat the same information, but you may need that. So mood and behavior, I think it's sleep, fitness, hormones, diet, nutrition, and behavior change. So those are the 4 we're going to keep cycling through. Yes, you'll get emails. FUT2AA is the ideal version. So you can take your full gut B12 and you do a better job with digestive enzymes for your vegan foods. Yes, you can use this recording again for when you have your reports, and you'll also be able to attend future webinars if you'd like. Next, they're going to be, I think, weekly, ongoing, forever. So I've made a commitment to be here with you guys until somebody else is able to take over, which we do have a few clinicians on our team that can speak to this level, and I'll probably still join and we'll switch it up, but they're going to be weekly, ongoing forever. There we go. AG version of FUT2 is right in the middle. So yeah, better not to be a vegan, better to mix it up, better. And if you do choose to be a vegan, you're in a place where you kind of on the borderline. So just make sure you add digestive enzymes, making sure you're taking a high quality digestive enzyme. If you're eating your beans, lentils, chickpeas, you might find that if you eat hummus or chickpeas, you're going to get bloated. That's not going to feel right, right? Stephanie Estima, I actually just interviewed her a few weeks ago. We're doing a female health summit, so it's going to appear there first, and then it will come on the podcast after. We've also been on her podcast, by the way. Deep Optimizer says, Deep Calm, not to take it with other supplements, how much time? So all it's saying is, so we're augmenting neurochemical pathways. We don't know what else you're taking. So we don't want to push you. So we're not saying don't take it with your omega-3s and your vitamin C and vitamin D. Just don't add other neurochemical supplements unless you talk to us first, because we don't know what the total load is. So these things will last like 4 to 6 hours. So if there's another brain supplement you take, just don't take it at the same time, or talk to one of our clinicians first and see what the total impact is. So we have been through all the questions. There you go. So we've been through all your questions. Again, the intention here tonight was to walk through your reports so that you can get more value out of them. That was it. You have them in front of you. How do you learn more than we're allowed to say in writing to a consumer in a report? And that was the purpose. So I hope that we were able to deliver that. If you think that there's more that we needed to talk about, let us know. Because as I said, we're going to keep doing this. So again, if there's some things that you thought you were supposed to hear tonight that you didn't hear, if you thought that there's some stuff that was not necessary because it was already in the reports and we're kind of redundant and wasting your time, give us feedback, because we're going to keep doing this. We want to keep making it better. The outcome should be better. So we're open to whatever you want to tell us, because the goal is to make it better. Hopefully a couple months from now, it's exactly what you need it to be, so don't be afraid to email us and tell us, I wish it was like this. You did too much of this, too little of this. And I needed to know more about this. We will keep doing that for you. And now look out for the email. So we need a dummy report of the genes. Yeah, I agree. A chart. So a couple of people have mentioned that. A chart. So I agree with that. Just some kind of visual. I specifically didn't bring on a visual just because as you can hear, there's a lot of information. I didn't want it to be overwhelmed. But I do agree some visual guidance will help. So with that, thank you guys for attending. The book is out, so if you're interested, it's now in stores. So Amazon, Barnes & Noble, everywhere. You can still go to theDNAway.com. You're going to love it. You're also going to hear a little bit about why this even exists and my story and how we got to this place. And coaching, a lot of you brought this up tonight. If you think you need more help, imagine what we did tonight, if somebody was doing that hands-on with you, right? And you were doing this weeks or months with somebody, the impact. Let's dive into your DNA and truly mine every little insight, the things that you may not possibly be able to find. Our coaches are set up for that, and we have programs that have been developed for that purpose. So to the point of people that asked a few times, yes, we do that. Email Neil. We will set you up with someone to help you with that. So thank you again, guys, for attending. Your energy also makes us better for all of us. Your inquisitive minds and your desire to get better makes us better. So thank you for being here.
Your genetics are a phenomenal thing. A 40-year-old person who looks and feels like they're 28 isn't because they left things to chance. They're doing things differently. Chronic disease, aging, poor performance. These are all the result of wrong choices. But how do you know what the right choices are for you? And what would be the impact if you always made the right choice? What if you can change the day you die? When you see those first wrinkles, those gray hairs, or a call from the doctor and they say, I need to see you, your test results are in. We've taken it for granted that this is meant to happen, that aging and disease are just a part of life. Well, what if they're not? You can't feel cancer coming. There's no warning that dementia is on the way, and so we think these things just happen. We get sick, we try to treat it, But it's too late. Well, now there's a better way. A way that puts us each in charge of our own destiny. Genetic research has advanced more in the last 3 years than the last 30. And this personal instruction manual that's in each one of us has finally been properly decoded. We can now get ahead of disease or even reverse it, allowing us to decide how we age. Our scientists have clinically studied over 5,000 people. We've sat in front of each and every one of them. We looked at their hair, their skin, their mood and behavior, their medical history, everything about them, all overlaid on their DNA map. We then understood where the biochemistry of your trillions of cells and the instructions of your 22,000 genes intersect. And with that, what choices each one of us needs to make to slow down aging and catch disease before it happens. I have no doubt that with the genetic insights we're seeing today, chronic disease will soon be a story that we tell our grandchildren. If you understand why chronic disease and aging really happen, you also understand that they are truly optional.